Alrighty. Well, it looks like we have a good number of attendees already with us, and it is noon, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for being with us this afternoon for this month's Your Hour with APA Virginia, generously sponsored by our friends over at the Berkeley Group. Today, your hour is pleased to present restoration of brownfield sites, and we have a lovely group of folks from Roanoke County and Vinton with us today. Pete Peters, Nathan McClung, Alexander Jones, and Megan Baker. And I'll allow them to introduce themselves a little bit further, but I just wanted to throw up this slide deck along with the CM information, which I'll also put in the chat in a moment. And then just run through a couple of housekeeping slides. So in the chat box in a moment, I'll also put links to our chapter website page where you can find all previously recorded webinars, upcoming webinars, and all other chapter announcements. We really do encourage questions throughout this webinar, but please submit your questions through the Q&A box. This will just help us keep track of all inquiries. If there's ever a point in which there's an opportunity for an open-ended discussion, feel free to use the chat box, or feel free to DM me if you have any logistical or chapter questions. Once we get to the Q&A portions of the webinar, feel free to use the raise hand feature to request to be unmuted. But otherwise, feel free to drop those questions in throughout the webinar in the Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared to the chapter's YouTube page in the coming days, hopefully by the end of the week, where you, as I had mentioned, can find all previously recorded webinars in the series as well. But I think that about covers it for housekeeping items. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. I am really happy that we're able to discuss this topic with Vinton and Roanoke. So I'm going to hand it over to our presenters and let me know if you have any questions.
Well, good morning, everyone. As Nathan pulls up our slide presentation for the Gish Mill project, I just wanted to quickly thank everyone for listening in today. Hopefully we can provide some details of a project that's been successful for us and some best practices of kind of how we've navigated a very complicated but very important project for the town of Vinton. As Gillian mentioned, my name is Pete. I'm the town manager of the town of Vinton. I've worked with the town for about 10 years. When this project actually started, I was assistant town manager, director of economic development for the town. This piece of property in particular, as you see there in our town seal, is that red building referred to as Gish's Mill. The building is over 200 years old and actually predates the town becoming an incorporated town. It was known as Gish Mill. The community was known as Gish's Mill, basically because of that building was constructed there on the navigable waterway. It was also adjacent to a railroad, so it was very important to the development of the town as a center of commerce for farmers in the area to bring their product into the larger Roanoke Valley. And so flash forward several hundred years later, the building, as you can see there on the right, has went through a few additions over the years. Nathan will talk about that a little bit more soon. The building did operate continuously up until about 2014. At the time, it was operated as a farm supply, more residential farm supply. So folks, you could buy fertilizer. There were some products there, horse feed and such like that residential homesteaders could provide or purchase a product. The Holdren's family at the time decided no one wanted to continue that business and they wanted to repurpose the property. So we allowed the private sector to try to have that sell initially. The auction happened in 2015, and unfortunately, no one stepped forward to purchase it. And so some very thoughtful leaders on town council at the time wanted to preserve the historic structure. As I mentioned, it does sit on our town seal and was very important to the history of our community. And so the town council stepped forward and made an offer to purchase the property. We did so in the fall of 2015. And that was just about the time that I started with the town. And it was one of my first projects coming on. Um, and our goal was to both preserve the historic property so that it wouldn't be further deteriorating and lose that history and connection to our roots. But we also wanted to investigate and try to repurpose the building to again be productive, generate jobs, generate revenue. So we were trying to thread a needle there to get a lot out of a very challenged property, but we initially started out with some architectural review of the building to see some of the conditions of the structure. It does set on a waterway, so as most grist mills do. So you can imagine there's some flood uh, challenges there that we needed to mitigate, and the age. So you can imagine it's very difficult. Um, on a path forward on how to make this work with so many challenges. So we just started one small bite at a time. As I mentioned, we did the architectural review. We did some building assessments. We eventually got to the point where we issued a request for a proposal, seeking out partners to help us get this developed. And we made it very obvious up in the early part of this is we did want this to be a partnership because this building, the structure was very important to the town, and we were willing to remove as many obstacles as we could. And we knew that this would take some town involvement. It wasn't just give them the keys and let them go with it. It was going to be a real partnership to make this possible. So we initially started eyeballing various grants that we could help buy down some of the stabilization and redevelopment cost. And then once we actually got into design and some of the cost estimates for build out, we've been seeking various grant funding sources. We've got public dollars. We've got local incentives built into that. I won't get into all those details. I'll let Nathan talk about those some. But we went through with the developer that we selected who had kind of outlined a few potential uses. We had interest of wedding facilities, but we ended up settling on a mixed use development that has a residential and a commercial component. Um, and you can see there in some of the aerial um, view of how that building's laid out. There are 6 silos on the left-hand side. They're kind of screened behind some facade there, but there are 6 silos. I believe they're about 40 feet in height. And that was actually used to store some of the grain. The original mill structure was that red building that was originally on our town seal. That is a 3-story structure, actually 4 if you count the basement. Then we have the addition number 1, addition number 2 that came on over the years. And so all that's being repurposed. And I'll let Nathan get into the details, but that hopefully illustrates some of the complications of the building and kind of the process for the town to get this underway, seek out our partners, and then start identifying funds and processes for getting this built out. So just really quickly, uh, just quick math. We started this in 2015, is now 2025. The building is currently under renovations, but it has taken us a long time. So this has not been a quick process. We've been playing long ball with this and really doing a thorough job. We did have a little delay there with COVID, as many of our projects did pause for a year and a half. But we've able to get that back underway in the last couple of years. And we're really excited to actually start seeing them swing hammers and starting to see it take shape of what the potential is that. So I'll keep my eyes open for any additional questions, but I think Nathan's going to take the presentation from here and give you some more specific details of some of the grants and some of the concepts of what will be built out with the facility. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. So I'm the assistant plan director for the town of Vinton. As Pete mentioned, it's been a project that's been long coming. I've been with the town for 7 years and had been working on the Gish Mill project for the full 7 years. Going just through the fun part of the presentation, where you actually get to see the schematics of what the property we hope to look like in the coming year or two. As Pete mentioned, it's a lot of additions going back from 1846 to 1940s. Throughout history, there's just been different additions for the silos and so a few modern additions that will be preserved as well. But looking at what we hope with it being a mixed use, where the grain silos are going to be located, or where the apartments are going to be, and also the original 1846, what we call the Q, will be where the short-term rental apartments will be located. But in the 1940s additions, you can see that there's a dining space, kitchen, and a deck. And then in the second 1940s edition, there's projected to have an ice cream shop. So looking at what that could potentially look like, just some schematics from our architects. That's what it looks like right now in the present day. We're hoping to have like a breezeway to access both the ice cream shop and the future restaurant. This is going to be the future bar, restaurant, and kitchen area with an open-end kitchen concept, so you can actually see the food being prepared on the other side, and the bar that opens up to both the inside of the restaurant and to the deck overlooking the creek. I'm just going to go through these pictures. This is another angle. This is what we're projecting to be the event space. This is in the actual 1846 3 or 4 story space. If you include the basement, it's 4 stories. This is extra dining space or event space, which is what the town needs, is a larger banquet style room. That glass area actually looks down into the basement. We unfortunately are not going to be able to use the basement due to cost and just technical feasibility. But our architects are good about wanting to make sure people are able to see as much history of the building as possible. So features like having glass and having the old equipment, everything lit up in the basement, was an idea. That's the basement. And then there's the ice cream shop. And then that's an example of what an apartment could look like. We're calling that the penthouse suite. And that's just an overview of both sides of the building with the wraparound deck, and then the apartments facing the back from the silos, and then outdoor patio area for outdoor dining. Going into the technical part of it, so I'm first talking about the local dollars and incentives that we had to build into this project to make it work. One, we have a performance agreement with the Roanoke County / Town of Vinton EDA. It involves both the county and the town. We have a payment at closing, the reimbursement of connection fees and permit fees, both from the town and Roanoke County, and then also a construction loan, which I'll get into later on. So the total amount of incentives on the front end, you're looking at about $1.5 million. Plus, we got the IRF loan from DHCD from a successful grant application to the town, totaling. So you're looking at about $2 million in local incentives. Quick note on IRF, so if you're interested in the DHCD program, it is a good program for things like brownfield sites. But if the town does receive the grant and the ownership's going to be a private property owner, it does have to be in the form of a loan, which makes things pretty tricky when you're trying to make the numbers work. But thankfully the town has made it work. But since we're not going to be the property owner, it had to be a loan, not a grant. But if the locality is going to be the owner for 10 years or more, it will be just a grant to the locality. Just quickly, and we'll send a slide deck out to you all, how the town, and Pete's a genius when it comes to working on these performance agreements, but how the town, giving $1 million construction loan for a locality of our size, it's a pretty monumental feat. However, we'd never give money, or especially taxpayer money, without the idea of recuperating those funds. So the way we're recuperating those funds is one, through a meals tax incentive. It's $48,000 over 10 years, which amounts to $480,000. Roanoke County agreed to a real estate tax disbursement of $200,000, and also, as I mentioned, IRF is a loan, so that loan will be paid back at a future date back to the town, even though it's in the form of a grant now. Pete did a good job covering the timeline of events, so I won't go into too much detail about these things.
And Nathan, someone in the chat
Yeah.
asked what an RF grant was. RF is an industrial revitalization fund, and that is a grant program through Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD.
Yeah, thanks, Pete.
Yep.
Yeah. And so Pete covered most of the history. Like I said, in 2022 was a lot of inflation, and we actually had to go back and revise our performance agreement because the just as important of having the money is also having it liquid and ready to be used. So you could have all the money built in and have the project funded, but when it comes to banks and everything, having liquid assets is just as important. So here's just a rough timeline of everything from 2015 to the present day. I'll get more into the grants at a later point in the presentation, but 2022 did kind of delay the project, which delayed which increased the cost as inflation and supply chain issues and COVID came about. In 2023, we really focused on the final A&E work, and then since then, the building's been fully stabilized, and we actually have we received one additional grant from Virginia Brownfields from VDOT for $500,000 for site remediation. And then also we just a few weeks ago applied for another flood grant because this property being located beside a creek is obviously in the floodplain and in the floodway. So just going over obstacles and processes. There's a lot of obstacles. It's a very challenged project. One was zoning, so it was zoned industrial. And in order to have the mixed uses that we wanted to accommodate for the mixed use project that we had in mind, we did have to rezone it. That was pretty straightforward. Obviously, you just work with your local council or local board to have it rezoned. That was a pretty simple process. What wasn't a simple process, and any CFM planners who are also CFMs or any localities who are CRS communities like the town of Vinton, just because you have your floodplain ordinance and it has that built-in adage about historic properties being exempt from the flood code, you can't just exempt them broadly from all your floodplain requirements. You have to actually pick out specific things and get variances for very specific things from your BZA. Thankfully, Virginia has a great DCR agency, and those people are really great to work with. You can call them up at any time. So I worked closely with DCR to make sure we were giving the correct variances so we wouldn't get dinged by FEMA or another flood agency in the future. All these projects, or at least historic projects, need historic tax credits to even be financially feasible for the private developer. So we had to get it registered on the national registration list. We obviously financial feasibility became an issue over time as the cost went up, and also finding a willing developer. But through the public-private partnership, we've almost gotten it down to like 50-50. So it's 50% private funds and 50% public funds from both the town of Vinton, Roanoke County, and also all these grant and loan sources that we found across the state. And then also inflation and time delays. Thankfully, the state agencies I just mentioned have also been very patient, just as the town and the developers have been patient with this project over the last decade. And being able to revise a performance agreement was pivotal, and just being able to communicate with the state agencies about the issues and communicate with the developers and being able to do benefit or value added things when it comes to actual design. Here's just a quick breakdown of the grant sources, and this is my final slide before we open it for Q&A. But in terms of flood mitigation, we looked at VDEM, or we are looking to VDEM to apply for a lot of the flood proofing measures because this is a historic property. It's located in the floodway, and we have to do things such as using waterproof insulation, elevating all of the utilities. A lot of flood vents are going to be installed within the building that previously didn't even have a foundation in many parts. So it's a lot of cost to the flood proofing measures. DHR also had a really good emergency supplemental hurricane grant. So with hurricane seasons coming along, always be on the lookout for additional grants, either from DHR, VDEM, DCR. Seems like whenever a hurricane hits, there's just a ton of money available for these kind of projects. Construction, we mentioned the IRF grant. It's pretty competitive across the state. Stabilization, the VBAF site remediation grant was a really great grant to use towards things like stabilization. Even, site remediation, you think about more environmental, which this is environmental, but if you work with your state partners, you can find ways to use that money creatively to work for certain projects, such as the Gish Mill. And then obviously with assessment work, either, if you're getting a loan from a bank, you need to have phase 1 and phase 2s done. I think Pete and I did 3 phase 2s on this project because they're only good for 3 months, or sorry, 3 phase 1s. They expire after 6 months, and so if you keep going back to the bank, or if the bank continually needs accreditation, you have to continually get those phase 1s as proof. But thankfully, the EPA Brownfield assessment program has been a useful source for the town. We've applied for that multiple times and use that pretty frequently in all of our brownfield projects. I mentioned VBAF and then DHR again for historic assessments, H&H, which is hydraulic studies for the flood aspects of it. But a lot of grants are tied into this project, and then a lot of local and state dollars are tied into this project. But there's also a lot of grants across the state that are available to help these things come to fruition. So with that, Pete and I are open to any questions y'all might have.
Thank you, Pete and Nathan. We do have a question from Justin Clark already in the Q&A. Was there any remediation needed on the side from its prior use, or things like lead paint? How did that impact the project outcome?
And Pete, you can help with this. I think surprisingly, we got phase 1 and phase 2s done, and I think in terms of remediation, I think there was maybe a lead paint or asbestos in the roof, which we're going to replace the roof anyway. But I don't think there was any other like red flags that were raised for this property.
No, that's correct, Nathan. We fortunately do have an EPA Brownfields assessment grant. We're actually on our second EPA Brownfields assessment grant process. So we had one in 2019, and we were awarded a second one in 2023. So we use that EPA grant funds to do the phase 1 and phase 2, to do a thorough environmental assessment of the property. But as Nathan said, just very minimal, and we were able to handle that mitigation through the renovations itself.
Thank you. And Justin also notes thank you in the chat as well.
And someone else also said about the acronyms that were used, and you'll have the PowerPoint deck, obviously, and if anyone wants to reach out to Nathan or I, will be happy to walk through in greater detail. That is a lot of acronyms, a lot of grant programs that we accessed. We'd be happy to walk those through with you and put you in the right contacts with the folks that we use throughout the process. And we learned a lot through this process ourselves, and we'd be happy to share those details with you. We'd make our day to help some folks maybe follow some of the same paths that we did.
Thank you, Pete, for that. I know folks appreciate you all being a resource. Just a comment in the chat from Brander Archer of DHCD, just noting that they administer the IRF program here and provides a contact information. I don't see any other questions in the chat lined up, and we can always return to any questions that you may have for Pete or Nathan at the end. I think that we'll have enough time. And feel free as we go to put questions in the Q&A, and just please note, which group you're directing your question to. But a question that I have for Pete and Nathan before we pass it over to Megan, can you speak to community engagement at all, public engagement throughout this process?
Yeah, I think we think they have a really good local paper. So whenever we received a grant, or whenever we were doing anything with the building, or the developer was doing anything with the building, we made sure to make sure our local newspaper reporter, or even some of the other multimedia companies in the valley were aware of, that we received the IRF grant. You can actually see the sign, the picture on the slide, putting the sign up. That kind of helps people know like what's coming and where it was funded from, which in this case was DHED for the IRF loan. But whenever there was some big movement on the property where you actually saw construction equipment or even something simple like tree cutting and bank stabilization, to make sure our local paper knew. And so that was our main thing. We also have a standing community development committee meeting that meets every other month. And so it seems like this has been on the agenda every single meeting since we started that committee. And so we keep constant updates on this project.
Thank you, Nathan. And it looks like Pete actually just submitted a response to a question regarding floodplain issues. Do you want to elaborate on your answer? I haven't had a chance to read it yet. Sorry, Pete.
Oh, no problem. So some of the physical ways we mitigated that is, as Nathan mentioned, we've elevated all of the utilities, so the electrical and the are actually elevated out of the floodplain, so a little higher on the walls than maybe an outlet would normally be. The kitchen equipment is also mobile. So if the property does sustain flood waters, for example, the kitchen equipment, rather than being affixed to the structure itself, it can be moved around so that we can cling behind it and kind of handle it that way. And then there's actually floodgates being designed in the structure itself. So as you can imagine, how elevated floodwater coming and pushing against the building causing greater damage. So the floodgates allow it to actually come into the building and flow out of the building. So it just becomes a part of the waterway. So that's a design feature that we've incorporated into that. And we've seen other structures in the Roanoke Valley have similar success with these type of design elements. So that's why and how we were able to come across them and incorporate them into the build.
Thank you. All righty. Well, we'll hand it over to Megan at this point. We are at the halfway mark. But again, we should, and Alex, I'm so sorry. And we should be able to return to questions for both groups if you think of anything in the meantime at the end.
Okay, all good?
Looks great.
All right, good afternoon. I am Megan Baker, Director of Economic Development for Roanoke County. I am joined by Alex Jones, who's our Assistant Director of Economic Development. He also focuses on business development, but the advantage of having Alex on our team is he was part of our planning department prior to joining us and can speak to a lot of what we've been doing to plan in this critical corridor I'm going to talk about. So site overview, we had an old office complex, Professional Park, South Park, 2 buildings built in the 70s, halfway occupied. The buildings, even if you went inside them, they smelled like moldy, but we knew this was a really critical property to redevelopment of one of our highest concentrated retail corridors. And so the property was zoned C2 already, high intensity commercial, allowing retail, restaurants, and mixed use. It was purchased by 3 developers in our area, Alexander Boone, Ab Boxley, and Court Rosen in 2024. And they really saw the vision for this property as well, what it could become, what it could contribute to our corridor. So as I mentioned, the strategic location of this property, it is just right down the road from Tanglewood Mall, Roanoke County's largest and most vibrant retail hub. It's seen significant, that whole corridor has seen significant new investment and redevelopment over the past 5 years. Carilion Children's and Carilion Mental Health went in the Tanglewood Mall, the mall from the 70s, investing over $50 million in the property. We've had multiple new dining options open, Chili's, Blaze Pizza, Chicken Salad Chick, just to name a few. And so it's been a really exciting time. And then the final piece is the excellent access to 581. We're improving the intersection as well. at 581, it's being upgraded to a modern divergent diamond interchange. So just a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investment, and we really knew this property, which is located right here, would be a critical piece to continuing the redevelopment of this area. Alex, is there anything you want to add?
No, so the county's been looking at this for 8 years now. We identified this part of the county back in 2016 as a prime area for redevelopment. Once again, it's anchored by the dated shopping mall from the 70s that kind of lost its luster in comparison to the other peer regional malls. So we're excited to see all the revitalization. We get to it in a few slides, but this plan was adopted in 2019, and since its adoption, we've had well over 30 businesses open in this corridor, so it's very exciting on that front. However, we were still looking for a complete revitalization, knock down buildings, build it from the ground up type development that the plan called for, and this is really that first project that's taking it over to the next step that's implementing the plan. So although we've seen a lot of commercial activity in the area, we're hoping this is the next domino for more redevelopment where we can knock down some of this dated infrastructure from the 70s and 80s and turn it more so into that mixed-use town center vibe that we're looking for.
And so just in addition to being one of our catalyst sites in this corridor, we the economic impact alone, you go from a property valued at $1.5 million, $2 million. The current estimated investment is $25 million. So job creation potential, expanded tax revenue for Roanoke County, also continuing to increase the real estate valuation along that corridor, and attraction for national retail and restaurants. So really trying to focus on those new to market, what we're trying to recruit. And this is just an outline of what the proposed development is. The developer right now plans office in the back, retail in the front, and then a mix of different retail in the front. And so we've had several prospects. We still continue to work, but we feel optimistic that we will get that mixed use development that that's the vision of the property. And I'll hand this over to Alex of how it really fits into our comprehensive plan, the plan for the area.
Yeah, so as I mentioned a minute ago, we began looking at this back in 2016. This was the first large-scale redevelopment community plan that we did. Oftentimes we did the smaller community plans. So the county partnered with Stantec and bid this plan out. It was a 3-year process to really get it to what the community and the region really wanted to see in this corridor. It's one of the hottest discussed topics in terms of economic development in the entire region. So the county really wanted to go about this project right. However, you can see towards the top of the picture there where it says mall retrofit and auto-oriented, that's really where the main mall space sits. However, we looked at 390 acres through this corridor here to turn it more so into a town center. That this part of the state really never got in the late 90s to 2000s like other parts of the state did. So oftentimes when we were going through the community engagement process, we heard everything that Short Pump was doing, Charlottesville was doing, Northern Virginia, and other parts of the state. And that's really what people wanted to see here. When we started this process, it was still kind of when town centers were, redoing their movie theaters and creating an anchor to the space. Well, we've kind of had to adapt to that with COVID kind of killing the movie theater industry. The mall couldn't really move forward with that like what was originally thought when we did this back in 2016. But fortunately, we had Carilion Children's, which is now the 4th largest children's hospital in the state, actually moved to this property, moved their entire campus over. So it's really helped serve as an anchor to bring in upwards of 1,500 people a day onto the property again. That really gets that commercial interest back onto the property and throughout this entire corridor. So once the plan was adopted, like I said, we had that large announcement, then over 30 other new businesses and a lot of those new to market move into the corridor. But we really wanted to define the design guidelines as well. So we then moved forward of adopting a set of design guidelines in 2022 to kind of turn this more so into mixed use development, something that the county really hasn't seen elsewhere in parts. We see it a lot in Roanoke City, downtown Salem, even Vinton. However, the county itself hadn't experienced a lot of that. So we wanted to define those to be a little bit more intense and mixed use than just our general commercial districts that we have around the county. And then finally, we just adopted our new 20-year comprehensive plan back in 2024 that we call the Roanoke County 200 plan, since it coincides with the county's bicentennial coming up in 2038. But a lot of what was sparked by this plan was carried over into our brand new comprehensive plan that's county-wide now. So, and like I said, we've seen some new buildings pop up in the corridor, but no wrecking balls yet, which was why this is one of the most exciting projects that we've had to date in this corridor. And we're hoping that we can carry the new to market momentum that we've seen on the mall property, but bring it down to this southwestern portion of this 390 acres that we're looking at as well. We're finally starting to see a little bit more interest in other uses in terms of new residential multifamily tenants, as well as hotels, office spaces coming back to this now that we're completely out of the COVID era now. So we're seeing a lot of interest through this corridor, not just on the commercial front, but to finally make this more so that mixed use hub that the county really wanted to do 8 years ago now.
Okay, so back to this parcel, we discussed why it was such a critical parcel. We felt like it really would get that momentum going of that mixed use, build on the momentum of the Tanglewood Mall redevelopment. But as Nathan and Pete mentioned in their presentation, none of these parcels are without challenges. And the main challenges we had to this parcel were that the buildings were aging, 1970s building, costly remediation. The asbestos alone was $830,000 to remediate. There were several utility upgrades needed to redevelop the site. The water lines actually will need to be replaced. The sewer line needs to be upgraded, stormwater pond. There was no natural gas line. So a lot of different utility adjustments. And then I would say one of the bigger ones we've been having to deal with is the traffic flow and entrance to the property. It is so close to the 419 electric road access. So it made it challenging to work with VDOT to figure out how can we get the easiest turning into the property. They've been working with VDOT to design a right in, right out on the property, and then also have a full turn light so you can get in and out. So there'll be the right in, right out, and then the left in. Is there any other thing I missed, Alex?
No, just an exciting thing about this project as well is just, you know, we're such on a project or parcel by parcel basis through this corridor still. So we are encouraging shared parking. With some of the transportation challenges that we've had to overcome with this project, it did get the developers to communicate with the neighboring parcels. So they're actually going to streamline all of the surface parking throughout this, and they're still even considering structured parking. But to where some of these parcels, especially the Carillion Wellness, which is a large gym facility right next door, they'll be redoing all the parking so it's not as chopped up and more streamlined. Because the hope is somebody can be parked and then walk to 2, 3, 4 different of these uses within the span of these properties. So, and not only are we doing this through the private redevelopment, but our transportation team and our planning department, they've been working to bring sidewalks all the way down to this parcel, as well as new crosswalks. So not only will you be able to walk from the gym to the new offices to the new commercial options, but you'll also be able to connect via bike lanes, sidewalks, all of that down the main corridor and through some of these side streets as well, which is very exciting because we don't have that in many parts of the county.
There, and I think also to just echo what Alex said, it's been a real team, a team effort, and VDOT's been really helpful as well, working with the developer. And so just trying to figure out what the best solution is for this site, for the Starkey 419 intersection. And it just so happened that VDOT has been redesigning that intersection right when we had this project. So it's been really nice to align this project with the 419 upgrades. So this comes to how we use the Virginia Brownfields Restoration and Economic Development Assistance Funds. Really, it's really helped to push the project over the line, to give the developer funds needed to remediate design around some of the site constraints. So we were awarded over $258,000 in funding. The first was a site assessment and planning grant. We received $50,000, and that was very critical to planning the project. It helped support conceptual site design, the asbestos study, and also, as I mentioned, really a lot of that VDOT access, road improvement, and then also utility planning, because we had to change the stormwater pond, had to figure out where the utilities fit best. So really glad we had that planning grant. And then we actually had the site remediation grant, which helped to remediate all of that asbestos. So we received $208,000 to remediate the asbestos. And then progress and next steps. So you can see on the picture, we tore down the 2 office buildings. The asbestos remediation is complete. This August, actually, as we're speaking, we have the site concepts finalized. The developer hired a regional retail broker, and I think they work in multiple states, CLO Group, to market the site to national, regional tenants. We're also trying to reach out to tenants in our nearby markets, including Lynchburg, Christiansburg, and Blacksburg, to showcase the site and try to recruit them as well. And lastly, the most important part is that we needed a new identity. And so its new name, it used to be known as Professional Park, but it's now Tanglewood Crossing.
And we did hear throughout this process, because we're working with our larger regional group as well on trying to attract new to market retail for not only Roanoke County, but across the region. But as Siegel Group and our retail strategies partners, we're sending out this property to try to get new to market activity. They said that the name Professional Park, obviously, there's still going to be some office on here, but needed a new identity. Just that sounded like an old office park. So our developers were eager to come up with a new name. So this continues the Tanglewood name that is anchored by the mall space, brings it down through this corridor for more of a unified aesthetic through this corridor. So we're hoping that that name will continue to trickle down the 419 corridor in recent years as well.
And I think it really helps unite the brand of the area that we're continuing to move forward with. And then this is our vision, very modern design restaurant. We're still trying to work also on a rooftop concept, retail. So the vision is ultimately you could come, you may work at the office building in the back, you can go have lunch, you can work out at the adjacent gym. Just really trying to create that synergistic design where you can live, work, play. And just to carry on again, the vision of why we chose this property, the investment in it is that it should hopefully be a model for the rest of our corridor, to the revitalization model, mixed-use community vision, really serving as that catalyst site, strategic location, that it will be a regional destination, not just a local destination, especially with its access to 581. We want visitors to come shop, exercise, dine. And then we want it to be really transformational. So whatever new to market chains we can recruit, new dining concepts, to really let that be an additional attraction for other new to market concepts to locate to Roanoke County. And then ultimately, it strengthens our whole destination and our whole corridor. Okay. With that, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Alex and Megan.
Mm-hmm.
So a question that we have in the Q&A, Tanglewood, did I miss it, or are there any pedestrian shared use pathways that go through parking lots and streetscaping, landscaping to encourage people to use these pathways?
Yeah, yes, we are working on that. So, as I mentioned, we are doing the next phase of the main thoroughfare through here, Route 419, putting sidewalks and bike lanes along that. However, some of the side streets that connect to this parcel, we are in the conceptual phase and working with VDOT to look at not only shared use paths, but sidewalks, bike lanes, all of that through Starkey Road, as well as some of the additional side roads through this corridor. We are hoping to make more strides in actually on the parcel itself, especially since they're working so closely with the gymnasium and the other nearby parcels to try to get those sidewalks on the property. And all of that is called for in our newly adopted design guidelines that we adopted for this corridor. We've had a lot of out parcel buildings pop up down at the old mall. But all of those were put in place before our design guidelines were adopted in 2022. So there's a lot of excitement right along the main frontage, along our new sidewalk. But one issue that has come up is to get from the old mall out to those buildings, there needs to be more of a pedestrian network. So we're actually communicating with the mall owner, the property owner, of how they can better connect, especially with future phase projects. But fortunately, these developers see the vision and really want to make sure this project is done right. So not only will the sidewalk be along the public frontage and go within the site, but that is why they've kind of leaned off. One of the new to market tenants that were looking at the property really wanted a drive-through on the property. However, they knew that that would keep it so auto-centric. There would be even more traffic concerns, all of that, where they could have easily signed that dotted line, but they're trying to negotiate with them of having a walk-up window and a patio type setting rather than a drive-through. So I think this project will take it to the next step. It's just this is the auto-centric development of the 1970s, 80s through here. So we're continuing to change that mindset and have these conversations with developers. But I think this project will take it to the next step, fortunately. And the design guidelines for this corridor that we can send out with this presentation do call for that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So another question we got from William Harris states, what is the potential impact to the Black community in the area? And I pose this question recognizing that it's obviously a complex topic, but if you could share, how your team took community impacts into consideration, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I can speak more so just on the overall planning area. So when this plan was adopted back in 2019, like I said, we went through 3 years of community engagement through this process. We had well over 1,000 people participate, not only just county residents, but residents and citizens from across the region, since this is one of the most heavily discussed economic development projects in the region. So we had a lot of community input throughout that project, but as well as during the development of the 419 design guidelines, which were adopted in 2022, as well as our comprehensive plan. One thing that we're constantly hearing for that we are taking some leaps in is the need for more accessibility across everything. So whether that's walkability, transit, all of that, this is the hub that's really continuing that transformation in the county. In terms of community engagement and participation on this particular project, everything that this project is moving forward so far is called for straight out of our plans. However, once we get a little farther on through when we can make some announcements, these are the developers that you want to have the conversations with. They do a lot of our residential developments in the county as well, and they really want to listen. I will say in terms of the office space in the back and all that, they're trying to open this up as well in terms of making it as accessible and affordable to different companies coming in there. So we're excited to work with them, and hopefully it'll create more of a partnership for future redevelopment projects as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. So, along the same, or in the same vein, we have a question from Sakura Namioka, and apologies if I'm getting name pronunciations wrong. What is the overall, population and economic development in the region? So maybe if you could just provide an
Yeah.
overview.
Yeah, that's great. We have around 300,000 in the region. And I'm trying to, that anything else? I mean, our major employers, we're actually, and I forgot to mention, this property is right down the street from the new medical school. All of the Carillion medical campus is growing there. And so it's really becoming a mecca for healthcare. We've got our retail, and we're close to 581. Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, and as Megan said, regionally we're about 330,000. The county itself, we're right under 100,000. And one thing we're trying to do with this project is the Roanoke Valley was really the retail commercial hub for about 30 years or so when Valley View and Tanglewood Mall were built back in the 70s and 80s. But as the Christiansburg-Blacksburg area grew with Virginia Tech, as well as Lynchburg with the growth of Liberty University, we're actually seeing a lot of new to market retail drift to those two areas before coming to Roanoke. So what we're trying to do is kind of bring back the regional attraction identity that we used to have in terms of the commercial real estate interests, and really create more so of a hub here in Roanoke County. Roanoke City is doing something similar with the Valley View Mall area, trying to revitalize that as well as trying to keep downtown Roanoke lively. They've done a lot of good job in downtown Roanoke with a lot of local things, but we are working to try to get some new national, new to market brands, not only at our two regional malls, but in the downtown Roanoke area as well.
And I think we talk a lot about regional, and I want to hone in on this point too. Alex mentioned we're doing a retail study with our neighbors, City of Salem, City of Roanoke. And so having that outreach by the consultants, us working together, really establishing back to our regional, our brand in the state for these, for retail, for all the mixed use and the new to market concepts.
And this is kind of a part of a much larger conversation that we had during the development of our new comprehensive plan. But one issue that the county is having is we have a very aging population, and it's not that way regionally. However, that has led to conversations of more mixed-use developments where there's different housing stock options, just like what we're seeing across the state nationally. Our average cost of housing is going up and up, and incomes aren't keeping up. There was just an article that came out this morning in the greater Roanoke region, average housing closing sale costs are now exceeding $419,000 across the region, which our incomes in this part of the state just aren't keeping up with. So whether those are townhomes, apartments, other options, that's what we want to see in our corridors like this. And we've heard from our development community that they really need to be sparked by commercial mixed-use redevelopment opportunities, that hopefully some of these vacant parcels surrounding it will see the mixed-use and residential with multifamily growth in years to come. We're in a lot of conversations with quite a few of those projects right now.
Thank you very much. And yes, our aging population continues to grow, so it's something that has to be taken into consideration. Elizabeth Marshall asks, can you please speak to what, if any, considerations are being given to incorporating energy efficiency and energy resilience in the development plans?
Yeah, I can't speak directly to that. I mean, I assume they're using the latest in energy efficiency. As far as just overall environmental impact though, working to redevelop the parking lot next to them, working on utilizing as much of what we can as possible, doing the asbestos remediation, all these things have really helped to redevelop, elevate the site in terms of environmental challenges. We're also upgrading the stormwater management there to today's standards. And so the whole footprint of the project really is helping to bring it up to standards for what we our environmental standards today.
Thank you, Megan. Alex, I couldn't tell if you were looking to speak.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, one thing that we are excited about this project is that there's many vacant parcels that are in close proximity to this corridor, but one thing that we're trying to do is redevelop and not continue the suburban sprawl that we have across the county, especially in this corridor. There's a lot of nice vistas and view sheds, nice hillsides in this corridor, so we'd like to see the development over the next decade or so be redevelopment, not continue to climb up the hillside and all that. So that's one thing that's very exciting about this. More so, that's called for in our 419 Town Center plan. We do have transit that connects to this area, so not everybody would actually have to drive to this destination. Obviously, finally creating more so of a mixed-use environment through here, where you're creating that downtown feel where people can hopefully either live in the area, walk to this, or at least their offices are in it to where they can walk to it during lunch after work and all that. And we're hopeful that the gymnasium next door to kind of helps serve as an anchor for this redevelopment as well, because there's conversations with neighboring properties as well that could hopefully, this is a good catalyst project that shows that it can be done on this end of the corridor, not just around the immediate mall area.
Thank you. So we are coming to the end, but I noted that our Gish Mill team was answering questions as we went. I'm not sure if there was anything, Pete or Nathan, that you'd like to elaborate on that you discussed, perhaps maybe on the elected officials question I saw come in, and maybe that's a question for both for both teams here. Relationship with elected officials and potential pushback, if not with this project, how you handle it, generally speaking.
I would say from our project, everyone's really excited about this, which is fantastic. I mean, there hasn't been that sort of NIMBYism that we've seen with especially housing developments in less developed areas. There's been excitement. Our board's excited and wants to support the project.
Yeah, and I will say it does help not having any adjacent single-family home parcels that we've experienced in other parts of the county recently. However, I do think this is what the Board of Supervisors from Roanoke County really saw when they put this plan together to get it off the ground 6 to 8 years ago. So to see this project finally come to life, I think they're finally starting to see more implementation from the private development sector. We've had well over $50 million in public infrastructure upgrades through here, most of those transportation related, adding sidewalks, new lanes, redoing intersections, things like that. So to see other private investment through the corridor, not just on the mall property, really has our elected officials very excited. And hopefully we'll get some residential growth through this corridor that kind of stems off all of it as well.
I will a little bit echo that on the Gish Mill project. Our council's been supportive. We've had a very consistent town council through the duration of this project, so we haven't had to necessarily reintroduce it to any new candidates or elected folks. So it's been pretty consistent in that regard, and they were very supportive of it from the start, and actually directing staff to originally acquire that property, and then through our strategic plan identified it as a priority project for us to move this forward. And it is a gateway, so it's a gateway project, so it sits on the entrance of the town, one of our two primary entrances into the town. There's not a lot of residential components that are being affected with this particular property. It's very commercial through that corridor. So we've had very little public pushback, a lot of questions, and we've just done our best to try to educate the public of where the funds are coming from, what the results will be, what the return on our investment would be when the project is completed. So we just been trying to be very vocal and very communicative with our council, but our general public to keep them informed and educated throughout the process.
Thank you all. And I'm sure, the nature of it being a brownfield also certainly helps on that front. Well, thank you. I am exceptionally appreciative of our speakers' time. this afternoon and for sharing your work in your respective areas of the state. I will be following up with all attendees in the coming days with the recording link and with the slides. And I know that all of our speakers are more than happy to be a resource if you have any questions after this webinar and in the days to come. But thank you, everybody. And I'm not sure if our speakers have anything else to add, but I appreciate everyone being here today.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.